old business. The first item under old business is amending ordinance 562, which is, the first item under old business is ordinance 562, amending the non-union employee classification plan. This is scheduled as a second reading and a public hearing. You want Mr. Lessard to introduce this, or do you just want to go through?
I think we just go to the second reading.
Well, as a review, who wants to read the ordinance then?
I'll do so.
Okay, thank you.
City of Claremont, in the year 2018, Ordinance 562, amending the non-union employee classification plan, the City of Claremont ordains, pursuant to Article 4 of the Claremont City Charter and Chapter 2, Article 5, Section 2-384 of the Claremont City Code, Attachment B to the non-union job classification plan, as adopted by Ordinance 535, May 14th, 2014. Is hereby amended and readopted as follows. Section 1, Job Classification. Attachment B is amended to revise the classification of an existing position. Grade 12, Chief Assessor. Section 2, Job Creation and Classification. Attachment B is further amended by adding the following permanent non-union employee positions. Grade 5, Legal Assistant. Grade 5, Part-time Community Center Farmers and Artisan Market Coordinator. Section 3, Salary Scale. Said positions have been graded to the job titles according to the duties and responsibilities thereof. The compensation for these positions shall be within the ranges indicated for the applicable grade on Attachment C of the City of Claremont 2014 Non-Union Employee Pay Schedule, Ordinance 535, as adopted May 14, 2014, on file in the City Manager's office. An individual may be hired at or promoted to any salary scale within his or her classification and designated grade if, in the opinion of the department head with the concurrence of the city manager, such individual possesses such experience, skills, and knowledge that meet or exceed the requirements of the position. Section 4, Validity. If any article, section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase of this ordinance is for any reason held to be unconstitutional or invalid, such decision shall not affect the remaining portions of this ordinance. Section 5, effective date. This ordinance shall take effect and be enforced immediately upon passage, and introduced and passed on first reading, and I don't have the date for that. But then a section for the adoption by the Claremont City Council.
First reading was on the 24th of October. Okay, is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, so the ordinance was read by Assistant Mayor Dameron and seconded by Councilor Pope. Any discussion before we open it up for a public hearing? Or is there anything you'd like to say, Mr. McNutt? Councilor Hart.
I'm going to go back to my original argument. How can we do this, even think about doing it, when again it's under the assessing, the assessor is under the planning and development division, under the director. I think if we need to change that ordinance first before we even entertain this. And I also believe, again, this is not the time to be doing a grade 12 under assessor.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yeah, I would echo somewhat of those same comments. And I couldn't vote in favor of this particular amendment, as I think grade 11 is the perfectly appropriate place for the chief assessor at this time. If there are changes coming in the future, or if it is deemed necessary to make changes within that position, then so be it. There's a process that it can go through. I think we have not seen, as part of any presentation, a position description. Presumably there was one created for grade 11. I've certainly not seen one, and I don't think any of us have, as far as a potential move toward grade 12. So I think in some respects, this is a little backwards, and we need to follow the plan or follow the process and do it correctly. So I would vote against this.
Counselor Stone.
I would concur with that I would be voting in the negative on this at this time. I looked at the numbers again, and again, you look at Claremont, Lebanon, Milford, and Rochester, which are similar communities. Lebanon would be the highest one, topping out at 91,000. And population-wise, Rochester tops out at 80, and they have 30,000 for a population. And they're a very similar city to ourselves. I also have a problem with the chief assessor. I think it should be changed to city assessor to go in compliance with what we've been working on in the policy committee. And that unless we're planning on having our own assessing department with additional assessors, there's no purpose of having a chief assessor if there's only one assessor in the office. And that's pretty much where I'm standing on it.
Other comments? Okay, it's slated for, did you want to say anything, Mr. McNutt? Okay. It's slated for a
Counselor
public,
Pope.
I'm sorry, Counselor Pope.
I just had a question for the city manager. Is chief assessor a city title, or is that a title that an assessor earns through licensing?
It's a title that they earn through licensing. Or Joe's here.
It's,
Podium,
It could
come
be
to the
either.
microphone,
I'm
please.
not, Joe Assad, your interim assessor. I think it could be either. In some communities, there's an awful lot of communities that call it chief assessor, even though there is only one. But there isn't any DRA designation, if you will, that specifies a title as being chief that I'm aware of.
Okay. Before, any other comments, questions, before we open up for a public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Lassard. Okay, is there anybody from, I'm going to open this up for a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this ordinance? Yes.
Joe Osgood, Ward 2. We're a community of 13,000 people. We're having trouble paying our highway guys what we should. I'm not sure we need to be looking at paying an assessor the amount of money that larger towns pay their assessors. But I will say that it's encouraging to see that, I wish that was flipped on the agenda, that we're going to have a board of assessors, hopefully, when this is done, because I'm thinking with a board of assessors, I wouldn't be doing a lot of homework on another case, just because this is a really good way to vet the problems. If I had my way, I'd have Marlene Jordan back here. I went through an assessment abatement with her. I got to say, I don't believe I ever ran into anybody at the city level that was as professional as her when I did it. We had a few disagreements. That happens in anything like that, but I think she did a professional job, and I think we look for somebody like her, have a board of assessors to support her, maybe make her feel better so she doesn't go looking for another job. I'm not saying she's coming back, but that could be the good piece for another assessor that we find. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Yes, Mr. Putnam. I can't get my computer. It just keeps, it just
David
goes.
Putnam, Ward 2. I have the opinion that this is a vital, important position for the community, especially noting the circumstances that we've recently gone through, which has divided the community in different ways. So however we do the assessor, you want to make sure you have one who's highly qualified, a lot of experience, and really knows what they're doing. I've heard the idea that we could share an expensive assessor with another community, And I think that would be a serious conflict of interest. I think if we hire an assessor here, we want to keep them focused on doing the job in Claremont and serve our community to the best of their ability with some oversight. I didn't know that this ordinance was removing the assessor out of the overview of the Economic Development Planning Office. I have a lot of respect for Nancy Merrill. I think that her oversight there would be to the benefit of the community with the assessor's position. No disrespect to the city manager, but he's got a lot of irons in the fire. And for me, that job description better suits somebody who's used to assessing already and housing conditions and the other buildings and facilities that we have in the community. So as far as the pay scale, I understand at level 11 there is some flexibility. There's a cap to that. I don't know what the range is. I've heard that the proposed salary isn't near the top of the Section 11 program. So I think it would be a disservice in some respects to change that new position to a 12 when there are other positions in Claremont who have bigger responsibility or as big. And to me, it would just be out of sync. So find a way of making it work with 11, maybe going to the top of the 11 scale. Those are just some thoughts I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. It's very important, though, that we fill this position with a really good person. I believe that it would play a big role in how we begin to reshape the value of our community so that it would have a good effect on the tax rate. The tax rate's driven by our low property values. So we've got to start thinking more of ourselves, thinking that we have more value here, and encourage a reassessment that will prove that to us.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public?
Chris Bergeron, I believe Ward 1, and a taxpayer and an employee of the city. A couple of the concerns that I have with it is that a grade 12, I believe, pays up to $92,000. I'm not sure.
Yep.
You know, that's going to be another position of $92,000 it was sending out of Claremont, first of all, from the talks that I've listened to. I've heard several comments, even over the past few years, that people have felt that contracting stuff out would be cheaper in a sense. And I believe we've contracted out the assessor part-time now, whatever, but you folks are talking about insurance and a lot of stuff like that with this position, which seems to be the major holdup with negotiations for the public works. So as a taxpayer, I'm concerned. Obviously, the taxes are high in Claremont. It's no big secret. We do need some sort of assessor, I'm guessing. I know the last few times it's been done, we've had cars show up at my house from Vermont or wherever they were that had a sticker on the door or whatever. So I'm not really sure how that works and stuff, but my concern is another $100 and something thousand going out of the city of Claremont again with insurance and benefits and everything. And as a resident and as an employee, I'm pretty discouraged. It seems every time that we've come up for contract, it's a fight. And that shows disrespect to us. We put a lot of time, dedication, excuse me, a lot of time away from our families during holidays, during the winter months, which I'm sure you folks realize, because you guys all have a nice Christmas. Our Christmas was here for 14 hours. So it's just unsettling to hear some of these discussions on this. So just take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Lesser. Is it okay, I mean, if there's, just a minute, is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak to this? If there isn't, then I'll close the public hearing, bring it back, and have you as the interim assessor speak. Is that okay? We're good? Okay.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. It's not my understanding that this would change the department head from being planning and development. I'm sure the manager can indicate whether it is or not, but it's my understanding that it does, it's still a division of that department. But what it does do, it's as you know, I came on April 1st as an interim assessor, and it was thought that it might be a 3-month process to find a permanent assessor for yourself, and that was what, 8 months plus ago. I know many of the people who considered coming here, and I contacted a few after we didn't really get any good candidates, and currently you have one good candidate who isn't willing to come unless the grade is changed. I don't know the specifics of what, what or why he wanted the grade changed, but at this point, I have indicated that my last day here has to be the 30th of this month. If things were to happen such that the gentleman does in fact come and he needed me for a couple of days in December, I would make every effort to do that for you. But there's just no way, if we don't have someone that's coming on board, then I really need to be done the 30th of this month. And it's a critical time right now because as soon as the Department of Revenue Administration establishes the tax rate, a warrant needs to be calculated so that everybody can, so that the bills can go out for prior to December 1st. At least that's the hope, so that they can be due January 1st. If they're not out by then they can't be. But in any case, I just wanted to indicate that my experience, if other people would contract out at the same rate as me, it's certainly not cheaper for you to contract it out. And I'll certainly be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have, but I would certainly urge the council to approve the this particular ordinance. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Lassard? Yes, Councilor Colasco.
Not really to Mr. Lassard, but I guess to the manager, and just a comment in general. Like, first of all, I don't believe in changing something, and I've said this before, for one particular candidate. So I understand we need an assessor, but my reason for doing so wouldn't be to court one particular individual. That being said, what is our game plan if we don't have, if he's leaving and this doesn't happen? Do we go back to MRI? Do they have somebody else? I don't know how this works.
I will have to start over, yes. Since April, I've been interviewing people. They have all declined or have wanted vastly more than I'm even seeking for this position. All of the applicants that we got were not qualified. 0 were qualified. None of them even approached having done remotely this work before. I'm talking, I got like retail sales applications. And Betty can confirm that, how far we looked. There's very few people in this position. Most of the professionals in this position are retiring. So it's going to be very difficult to find starting from square one. I will probably have to try to contract the position out. I do not think that MRI has another person available, so I'm going to have to try to find another contracting agency. But as Joe Lassard said, This is a pretty critical time. I've been looking for this position since April. I understand that, you know, it's not usually the plan to change a grade of a position for a person, but the assessor is a singular position, and it's a highly technical position, and you need some folks with some skills, especially Claremont. The assessing division here in Claremont has not been well supported over the past couple of years, and that lack of support is some of the reason why we're seeing some of the situations that we're seeing. Again, like I said, I don't have a clear plan if you folks don't approve this tonight, except for I recognize I will have to start over, and I don't have a clear picture of when I'm going to be able to get a qualified person.
Councilor Ahern?
Again, I'm gonna, taking back that we're again pushing back towards a person. The intern assessor, again, referred to a certain person, and now, again, we're referring to the person. I don't know who the person is, and it doesn't matter to me. We need to deal with this at hand. And to tailor it, again, even talking about tailoring it to somebody is out of the question. I mean, I don't know.
So, how many people were interviewed that you felt were qualified?
Oh, less than 6. I want to say, yeah, about 4 or 5.
And what was the average salary they were looking for?
Above 90s, and between, I would say, the 92 and 120,000.
So, when you said the assessing division wasn't properly supported in the past, what did you mean by that? And the reason why I'm asking is because if we're going to do things differently than if we were coming up short in the past, what was it that wasn't being supported?
Marlene, again, no disrespect to Marlene, I also think she did a great job, but she was not an assessor. She would probably be one of the first to admit that she was very overwhelmed in that office.
So she was not DRA certified.
Correct.
So just so everybody on the council knows and the public knows, according to our Muni code, it says that the assessor shall, not may, shall be DRA certified. So that is a qualification that kind of limits the pool, is what you're experiencing. The problem we have here is we have a city manager who has a definite need within his staff to get a job done. We all recognize the importance of assessing. The issue is...
No, I didn't want to interrupt you.
The issue is how do we do this in a way that's fair across the board? And perhaps while you're looking for a backup plan, you know, are there other types of things that can be considered, like bonus for a short period of time? We are going through the full reevaluation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that impact the need of the assessing division?
It increases the need. We're going through a reval without an assessor. We looked into it today. Betty and I do not have the ability to offer signing bonuses. That was a special provision for the police department.
Yeah, and then I asked the question, if that's the case, you know, why is that not, why do you not have the authority? Does it need to come from the council? And so what I'm saying is that we need some alternative options, because what we're seeing here is increasing a grade to 12 means that you're putting the assessor, who's ahead of a division, on the same level as department heads, and you've got one department head that's still at grade 11. So, I understand the need, and I think, I'm willing to do what we can at this end to work hard to make that happen, but under the current structure, it doesn't make any sense.
So, my plan was, we hire this individual, and, it could have been any of the individuals that I thought were qualified.
Mm-hmm.
They come in, and they determine what they believe that office needs, working with the new Board of Assessors. So that they would come back to the council and make a recommendation. We think that this should be a department, and we should pull it out of planning and development, or we think that this should be a division under finance and administration. I was going to leave it up to the new assessor to make that determination about what their office best needs, and then come to the council themselves with their own proposal to make those changes. The point was to get a qualified assessor in that office to start looking at what needs to be done. Joe, for the most part, while he was here, has determined what needs to be done. Kim Burkhart, for the most part, has determined what needs to be done. But that's going to take a teamwork of this assessor working with their assessing technician.
Councilor O'Hearn?
Motion to table.
Second.
Can we just vote?
You can vote on the motion
To table.
to table.
Who was the second, please?
I was.
Councilor
was.
O'Hearn and
Thank you.
Councilor Stone.
I feel like the majority of us are on the same page on this.
Yeah, I know. So let's do a roll call on tabling the motion.
Till when?
So it's ready.
I thought you were supposed to specify a date.
No, you can
No,
pull off
I
at
don't.
any time.
You don't have to.
Okay.
Motion to table. Counselor Lassard.
Yes.
Counselor Ahern.
Yes.
Counselor Stone.
Yes.
Sister Mayor Dameron.
No.
Counselor Kier. No. Counselor Klosky.
No.
Counselor Pope.
No.
Mayor Lovett.
No. So the motion fails. So, Assistant Mayor Dameron.
Yeah, a couple of questions of the city manager. I really don't think we ought to be with this kind of stuck in analysis paralysis. But if you have a position description, a new position description, how is that assigned a particular job grade? What's the process that it goes through? I'm used to a process that you would have 3 or 4 department heads examine and assign a point scale to a position description that would help you determine where on the salary schedule it fits. How do we do it here?
I had HR look into it. HR put together the recommendation. It went to the Personal Advisory Board, and they voted to recommend bringing it to the council.
Okay, and the Personnel Advisory Board did that
On 9/11, I believe.
Okay. Well, the more I think about this, the more I've come back to where Councilor Kier was initially, which is that it seems like we have the cart before the horse. I don't think we need to be stuck in a process that'll take forever. I think if there is a position description that can be furnished to the council justifying, even though the Personnel Advisory Board, I guess I'd like to see the minutes of that meeting, but I don't know how they came up with a grade 12. Grade 11 still fits, I believe. It's got a minimum of 53,410, midpoint of 62,470, and a top end of 81,237. I think that still fits. And there's nothing that says a person can't come in presuming they can fit within the dollar range, even if they're on the upper high side of this, and still continue to go ahead with examining the position. And if it's felt that it is deserving or really should be a grade 12, it can be examined and done then as part of a much broader look at where it should fit and what departments need to be established, where the divisions are, and so on. I just really believe we've got the process backwards here. I do believe we need a full-time assessor. I believe it's critically important. I don't have a particular problem with salaries, but I just think the process needs to be done correctly, and I don't believe this, the way it sits now, I don't believe this is a grade 12.
Wait a minute, on the sign, anybody? Councilor Kowalski?
I just had a question on, what was the number of abatement applications that the city saw this year?
Well, Mr. Lassard said 79 since December of 2017.
And are those,
Approved, not how many they saw.
Well, that's true. Well, Mr. Lassard, I don't want to speak for you, so if you could go to the microphone.
If that was your question.
What was the comment that you made?
How many applications did you process, not necessarily how many got abated?
I think 79 was the number that were abated. There were a bunch that was denied, but I can't really tell you how many that was.
Do you have like a ratio approximately?
I would say that in terms of the denial, it might have been in the vicinity, maybe between 1 and 2 dozen. I honestly don't know, because obviously some of them were done prior to my coming,
Understandable.
just as some of the 79 were.
Councilor Kowalski?
do you know the dollar amount that the city either abated or, in terms the city lost? How much money did we lose?
In that same time, I'm sorry, I don't have that number in my head. I'm
It was-
gonna guess it was 400,000 or 500,000. Maybe it was more
I
than
think,
that.
no, it was, when you said 79 were abated since 2017 during the September 19th meeting, the total number was 980,000.
Okay.
The reason I ask these questions is because as we're wrestling with this, there's a bigger picture to me. And like, as the state law reads, we're supposed to fairly tax individuals. And I think, frankly, we've done a really piss poor job of that for many, many years.
Yep.
And I don't know the solution. I know we're wrestling with it. But when you're preparing a case before the Board of Land and Tax Appeals or Superior Court, nothing plays in your favor as not having somebody that can go fight that fight for you. So at the end of the day, a contracted service that is here or may not be here, or obtaining a qualified applicant is very important. And any decision that I would render in doing such, again, wouldn't be for one particular person and changing a grade for that person, but it also is in no way trying to slight the efforts of trying to do what's right by the DPW or any other union. But it's something, frankly, we've lost a lot of money in the past, just the 8 years I've sat up here, and even prior. I was the kid that watched politics, but this isn't something new to this city. And the law says what we're supposed to do, and every year we frankly keep getting our rear handed to us. And then on top of that, I mean, other municipalities, I have Keene up in front of me, but number one, ensure that property of all types in the city is valued fairly, impartially, and equitably in relationship to all of the property. So no taxpayer pays more than his fair share, no less than his fair share of property taxes. We are lousy at that.
Well, I think we've all agreed that the process is not the correct process here.
May I?
Yes.
I just want to say that there is an effort right now to try to solve that, and that is through going through this revaluation that has been contracted and started. But it is critical that there be oversight of that company that's doing the revaluation. 2 days a week is impossible time for that to happen. That's all I've been able to be here. And so if you do continue to contract out with somebody else, then I would certainly urge you to have much more than 2 days a week, because there are so many things that are not getting done, because Kim and I can only do so much, and especially with me here 2 days a week. But she is working her heart out to keep things going there. And it just, if you have someone else that's not here close to full time, it's going to be overwhelming for her. And so, that's all I just wanted to say, that 2 days a week isn't enough, and that the reval, if it's properly overseen, will solve the problem that you've been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McNutt?
So again, I mean, really all I have to say is what Joe just said. It's very critical that we get a qualified assessor. I spent a lot of time trying to get somebody to agree to come and be the qualified assessor for the city. This is probably the highest qualified person I spoke to out of all of them. I don't think their request is unreasonable. We're not making the request to change the organization of that division. I wanted that to be a recommendation of the person, because maybe that is a recommendation they would make. Maybe they wouldn't make any changes at all. The system works, or the current organization works fine, and they just need to be able to work in a fully staffed office. For example, we haven't had many of our building permits entered into at the assessing office, just because it's a data entry burden that gets put down when the tax rate has to be set, or any of the other actual duties, in that day-to-day office. So again, it's unfortunate that, I would have just hired this person if they didn't want an amount of money that was beyond the grade 11 scale. We would have just hired this person. But they wanted an amount of money that was beyond the grade 11 scale. I guess we could have proposed to change the scale of the grade 11. This just seemed to be, working with the attorney, this seemed to be a faster way to achieve getting this person on board, getting them in the office quicker while Joe was still here, so that there would be overlap and transition. And so that's why we went with the proposal that is currently before you.
So I think the consensus of the council, from what I understand, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, that this is not the right proposal. And maybe the best proposal would have been to adjust the pay range. It's just, you cannot have an assessing division person at the same pay scale as a director. I mean, I don't even know how that would work. I understand what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I think the better approach, and the council, correct me if I'm wrong, would be to revisit the pay scales for each grade.
And if I've read this correctly, the pay scale was set in 2014 and probably hasn't been adjusted since that time?
I don't know. I'll have to check.
Yeah, I'd urge that. Much like we go through with negotiating the contracts and every other thing, if we've got something stuck in the sand of 2014, it may be in need of adjusting in and of itself.
Councilor Pope?
So I was hesitant to vote down the tabling, but I think that if we're going to table it, we're just going to be kicking this can down the road. Just kind of taking notes about some of our issues we have. Just the department structure for the grade 12. That's what Councilor O'Hearn has brought up. Making sure that's done properly. We can't ignore it that we have some underpaid staff positions right now, including these folks out here. We have the Claremont training ground, which I think we started trying to rectify with the police department, and can rectify here, and also with this thing here. Have the citywide reval, have a loss of Mr. Lassard on the 30th. The one thing I do want to mention, though, and it's something I see in a lot of positions, I'm even seeing this in beyond manufacturing, it's the graying of the professional workforce. As we start to see that happen, we start to see the loss of skilled people. Skilled people can drive heavy equipment, assess the whole bit. We're going to have to pay more. I know that's happening in the manufacturing workforce for good professionals. We're going to have to look at a lot of our pay scales. What's fair? What's going to keep us from being the Claremont training ground? You know, in all our positions. We've already rectified that in a couple areas, at least a little bit. So my suggestion here, I already know where this vote's going, and rather than table it, at least, if we're going to vote it down, at least vote it down with direction and try to get something to us real quick. I don't know if that's going to help the situation now, but
Okay, so that's a good suggestion.
that's why I didn't want to table it. I appreciate that effort to table, but I think we need to, if it's going to go down, we already know that direction right away.
Okay, so going from that, Counselor Pope, let's have a motion
Motion to move?
no, to
Move the
approve it.
question.
Yeah, to approve the ordinance or not. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
I think.
We already have.
Move the
Oh, do we
question.
already have it?
Yeah, it's just a matter
Okay,
of
I'm
voting.
sorry.
Just move the question,
Mr.
please.
Dameron, motion to adopt, and Mr. Pope seconded.
Okay, so we'll just
Roll call.
roll call.
Okay, Counselor Lassard,
Yes.
Counselor O'Hearn,
No.
Counselor Stone,
No.
Assistant Mayor Dameron,
No.
Counselor Kier,
No.
Counselor Kolowski,
No.
Counselor Pope,
Yes.
Mayor Lovett.
No. Okay, who would like to make a motion with direction for the city manager?
I'll take a
Assistant-
stab at it.
Yep, Assistant Mayor, you want the
Counselor
honors?
Pope?
Counselor
Well, no, I
Pope?
just wanted to make sure that before we have a motion, we've got clear consensus of what direction we want.
That was going to be
Well,
part
that
of the
would,
motion.
yeah. Do you have
That
something?
we're all on the same page
Well, I think
about
the
it.
first big sticking part was probably the department structure for the grade 12, if you're going to move that up to a director, which it didn't sound like that was going to be. So is the direction going to be to look at the raising of the grade 11 scale?
Yes,
I think you should
wanna
look
make
at all
sure.
those scales.
yes.
If there's any discussion on that before we have the motion.
I think it should, my input is a comprehensive review of the pay scales per grade, but with special priority for grade 11, because this seems to be the grade that an assessor would fit into.
Do we have a date? We would like that now.
Well, our next meeting,
I don't know if that can be done by next meeting. A broad review of all of the department wage scales will probably
Well-
well,
take-
with the priority for this particular
Are we looking at merit plan? only?
merit, yeah.
I mean, if you want a proposal back just for the grade 11, I might be able to get that turned around by the December meeting, but I would not be able to get an entire wage review of all the grades done by even the new year.
Counselor Ahern?
I had asked probably 2 meetings ago to get all employees' pay rates, union and non-union. So I would assume that was being worked on. It would help this. Is it?
Getting the pay rates doesn't.
I asked for it a couple meetings ago. I assumed that you were going to answer that request. So is that being worked on, or are we just going at this again?
I will check where that is at, but that is not part of what it would take to do a grade review, wage scale review.
What was your request?
I had asked for all employees from the top all the way down. Actually, if I remember right, it was union and non-union employees, so we can have an idea where everybody's being paid. And it was within the last 3 or 4 years, just to have an idea if people had gone up in pay or stayed the same, and et cetera. And I made that request again a few meetings ago.
I'm sorry, are you looking for the pay scale of the position, or are you looking for particular employees?
All employees,
So,
from the top, from the city manager, all the way down to the bottom.
and you're
So we-
looking for this for
I'm a-
timeframe?
We're talking about full-time employees, be it merit or union. I want all employees so we can understand where everybody is on the pay scale,
And you want that for current?
from at least 4 years to current. If they've gone up in pay or down in pay or stayed the same, so we can have an idea of where people are in this city that are employed by the city. And this, again, I made this request. This would have been helpful, I think, to help us in this avenue. I just don't know where that request is currently at.
And you want just all of the positions, right? You don't mean individuals over the past 4 years.
Yeah, all the employees. There's been a time where I've seen a list where you can have everybody's name and what they're being paid.
Right.
They're city employees.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sure.
But if you give me the current this year, that's not going to tell me if they haven't had a pay raise or increase in the last 3 years. That's why
So you want all the grade and step increases
I want
within that.
each employee, full-time, merit and non-merit employees, from you to the last employee that's full-time. I'm not concerned myself with part-time. And I want at least the 3 to 4 years ago to current, what they were being paid then and if they've had an increase to now. And again, I made this request a few meetings ago, and I know it would be something that would take a little time, but now we're talking about the assessors thing, and I think this would have helped us to get an idea of where people are in the pay, and, are we paying too much, paying too less?
I'd like to see, I know when Mr. Sanagate was the city manager, there was a review done, and the council never saw, to the best of my knowledge, the outcome of that. We paid somebody to come in here and do an evaluations.
Right.
That would be helpful to the
I will
council.
check with Betty. I didn't realize nobody had seen it.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yeah, so that, again, we don't get caught up trying to overanalyze all of this. I recognize we do need someone. I've stated my support. But I would request that the grade review be confined to grade 11 and grade 11 only, that the position description itself, after a determination is made of the grade range, go back before the current Personnel Advisory Board for a regrading. I'd like to see where they come in this time around, and then have that brought back to us. That would show the results of their grading as well as the review of grade 11.
Would you like to make that a motion?
I will make that a motion.
Did you get all of that, Ms. Russell?
Hold on a second.
Madam Mayor, just as a point of order, you posed citizens' comments on this 45 minutes ago. Some things have been raised within that 45 minutes.
Can you go to the
questions?
Can you go to the
I don't mean to be a stickler here, but like I said, you closed it about 40 minutes ago, and during that time, some stuff come up that's actually piqued my interest. So, the first thing is, if you adjust the scale 11, how many people is that going to affect? Obviously, I'm assuming you ain't going to just reset that for one person.
Right, that's what we're trying to gather all this information to answer that question.
Okay.
That's one of the
just,
questions.
that's something when it comes out, I just don't want it for one person. I want to know what
No.
the total effect will be.
That's
And
what we're talking about.
originally, I thought we were talking about one position. Are we really talking about one, or is this person, if they do get the job, are they going to need more employees once they come in?
One person.
One person.
At
According
least
to
to
the city
begin.
manager there, when I was listening to him, it kind of sounded like that he may need additional staff after that.
I think there has been discussion that they may need a clerical body or a technician, but beyond that, no, nothing further. At
So
least
we're
not
talking
that I'm
about three
aware of.
jobs and not one, right?
Pardon me?
We're actually talking about three positions and not one.
Not in this, not in the
Two.
proposed ordinance.
No.
We already have an assessing technician, so we're only talking about one position.
Okay.
Right now.
Then something Mr. Bergeron kind of hit on. We're not really talking about 92,000. What's the total package that going to be, about 130, 135 with benefits?
I haven't seen it yet. I don't know.
So we're a little bit,
I think this is, you know, when we're talking about that we got to be a little accurate on. Because as we all know, base salary, when you add in all the benefits, it ain't no longer 92. It's an entire different ballgame.
Sure.
And as a citizen, that's something I kind of like to know. Thank you.
thank you. So, Ms. Russell, do you have everything that Assistant Mayor Dearman said?
Let me see. Motion to, let me put this in the terms of a motion. That the grade review be confined to grade 11 only, and after that determination, send the position description to the PAB for grading. I'll tell you that the PAB does not grade it.
Okay, that is my understanding.
That is, so can we put in there send for grading and just leave out who we're sending it to?
It had been my understanding from the city manager's comment that the Personnel Advisory Board did that review.
The PAB does review it, but it doesn't grade the position.
Doesn't grade it?
That is correct. The PAB does not grade the position.
Well, I'm really only interested in whatever organizations take the PAB designation out. I'm really only interested in who gets the final nod regarding what grade is to be applied to that position.
Okay. So, and after that determination, send the position description for grading and bring the results back to the council.
Correct.
And then bring to the,
Do we want to say anything about reviewing the entire scale at a later time, or no?
That'll be I was going to make that later after we
Okay.
at least
I just
dealt
wanted to
with
check.
grade 11
Thank you, sorry.
for this position.
okay, so put this together. A motion was made by Mr. Dearman that the grade review be confined to grade 11 only, and after that determination, send the position description for grading, and then bring the results back to the council. Does that cover it?
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so Assistant Mayor Dearman made the motion, it was seconded by Councilor Keir. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes. Who wants to do a follow-on motion about the overall grade ranges?
I think Mr. Putnam is volunteering.
I'll do a follow-on that I don't know when it would be certainly appropriate. We're now in December, under that scenario that we just laid out.
Or say upon completion?
I would want us to be reviewing the results of the previous studies that Mr. Sandegate had done, and then to make a determination as to what our action would be after that review.
Now, is this a motion, or you're just stating this?
I'm just talking.
Thank you.
So we're good now? We have direction? Do you have everything you need from us? Okay. All right, we good to go? Okay. So, moving on to ordinance 563 school zones. This is